What's up guys, Asian here again with another Trials Guide video. Today we're going to be going over the twins in Maw of Lorkhaj. So the twins are one of the, widely regarded to be one of the kind of humps that you have to get through, that most progression guilds have to kind of crest in order to continue on to VMAW. Just because the mechanics of the twins is a little bit complicated and it's a little bit difficult to learn, especially for newer groups. Plus there is a DPS check that is kind of a soft DPS check. You can actually muscle yourself through it, but it is very difficult to do so. So a lot of new groups will find a little bit of difficulty trying to get through the twins, but once you get past the twins, it's actually fairly easy to get up to Rakat, and then just progress on Rakat afterwards. So we'll be going over mechanics, and I will have down in the description below an image of positions that I'll be going over during this video in order to give you guys an additional visual aid for this fight itself. So starting off first with the twins themselves. So you have two twins here. So, so if we go ahead and take a look. Let's see here. So we have the first twin, which is called the Light Boss, also known as Skin Rye. And then there's the other twin, which is going to be right behind me back here, called Vashai, also known as the Dark Boss. So these two bosses are twins, and so they are generally what we consider to be the name that I just called them, White Boss, Dark Boss. That's generally what we use. We don't really use Skin Rye or Vashai, so it's always going to be Light Boss or Dark Boss. Now you can see here that we're split up into two groups here. So you have two groups of 6, one tank, one healer, 4 DPS on each side, and then we are kind of centered between them here. So if we go back to 5 seconds here, this is the entrance. So after you've beat the ad pole here, you'll be going in from here. And there's going to be a line of candles in the middle of the room. This is called the center line, and you generally will not cross this line except during prayer phase and during color swaps. So that's just something to keep in mind here. So the starting positions, there will be a blue candle in the middle of the room. You can see there's white and blue candles. So you're basically going to be lined up on the blue candle here. If you just make a straight line straight back to the back door, the exit, this is where you can be safe. You can basically stand here and not pull either of the two bosses. Now, like I said, one tank, one healer, 4 DPS on each side. There's going to be the exit team, which is going to be centered on the exit side here. And then the entrance team, as you can kind of guess, is centered on the entrance side. So each tank is going to start off with taunting one of these bosses, and you're going to swap once they apply colors. So each boss will apply the same color head to 6 people, closest people to them. So Skin Rye will apply light heads to the closest 6 people, and the same thing with Vashai. Now, with the colors heads, if you run into somebody with a different color head than you, you will explode, and both of you will die. So that's why you want to basically stay separated. It's always going to be 6 people to a side. Now you can only damage the boss with the opposite color head. So if you start off with Skin Rye and you get the light head, you can only damage the dark boss. So that's basically what the head colors are. So if we go ahead and start the fight here, you see we pull the bosses, and then we kind of go over to the center here. This just basically lines them up a little bit better for Destro ultis and blockade. And then they'll apply the colors. So it's Lunar Aspect and the other one, I don't remember what the other one was called. I'm sure it'll pop up eventually. But we have the light color head here, and you see here we have the dark color boss. And these are basically where you want to position the bosses. So they're both going to be fairly close to the center line here. So that's just to help deal with the mechanics. So there will be ads that spawn basically after colors are assigned, a couple seconds after colors are assigned. You'll start off with 1 ad, and then it's supposed to increase by 1 with each prayer phase. So it should be 2, then 3, and all the way up to 4. It is a little bit bugged where you will get 2 1 ad spawn sometimes, then it will go immediately to 3. Sometimes you'll get 2, other times you'll get 1. So most of the times I've only seen 1 ad spawn after the first prayer phase, and then it goes into 3 after the second one. So that's just something you want to keep an eye out for. Now each of the 2 main bosses has their own mechanics. So Vashai will actually put a negate on the farthest person in the 180-degree cone in front of him. So if you basically draw a half circle in the direction he's facing, he can drop a negate basically on anybody within that 180-degree cone, and it's always going to be landing on the farthest person from them. The Skin Riot, on the other hand, over here, he has two moves. He has a J beam, so it's basically just stuns whoever he's targeting. It's normally going to be the tank with a radiant depression that has to be interrupted. And then he will also use solar flare or reflective light, basically the exact same thing as a Templar move. That'll put a dot on you, so that can be purged. The dot itself, the reflective light, is kind of placed randomly, so it can hit any 3 random players. The ads themselves also have moves you want to watch out for. So the Dark Ad can shoot out those bubbles that you saw there. So if we back up, you can see that when he draws his hand back, he shoots out those 3 bubbles. Those will stagger you if you block them. If you don't block them like I was there, they will not stagger you, so that's just something to keep in mind there. The white ads, just like Skin Riot, will have the Jesus Beam that needs to be interrupted. Otherwise, it will stun whoever it is they are targeting. From what I can tell, it's going to be a random player that's targeted, so it can be somebody very close or somebody very far. There's no really reason to rhyme or reason behind it. So we're just going to go ahead and move along here. So you can see here that we are basically chaining the ads in close together. So that way the ads die to cleave against the bosses. So that is the negate. When the negate goes down on the dark boss, basically what you do is you dodge roll towards the center of the arena, and then you just reposition accordingly. You always want Vashai to be facing the outer wall, so that way he drops his negate on you, and you can just dodge roll out of it. Then obviously you just want to chain in the ads if you do have to move. Now, you did see that color swaps did go out there. So let's see if we can find it a little bit earlier. So when they duck down and raise their hand in the air like this, 3 random players will have their head colors actually swapped. It will not ever hit the main tanks as long as they have taunt on the bosses, so it will usually be the DPS or the healers. Now, the color swaps are exactly what it sounds like. If you're a dark head, you get a light head. If you're a light head, you could get a dark head. And the exact same mechanics apply. So if you're close to somebody with the opposite color head, you'll explode, and so on and so forth. There is a small window, basically a vulnerability, where you're able to stand close to somebody, but after that window is expired, all the mechanics happen as usual. So you can see here, on the dark side, they have the light circles underneath their feet. That means they're going to change colors heads. And then on the light head side, you have dark color circles underneath your feet. Raid Notifier will tell you if you are targeted to get the color swaps. And so when you get the color swaps, there's a little bit of a delay until you can get it. So just don't swap over to the other side until you are sure that you have the opposite color head. If you're going from the light boss to the dark boss, you'll be cutting through the center here, and that's just so that way Vashai doesn't accidentally drop a negate on you while you're running over, because that will typically end up killing you. And dying in this fight is generally very bad, just because it usually results in an inbounds. There's not very good opportunities to res after color swaps has happened, because prayer phase is usually a few seconds after that. Now if you're going from the light head dark boss to the light boss, you're just going to go basically back around and basically loop around that way. So you can cross over the front of the light boss, just don't get too close, because he does have a cleave that's directly in front of him. So you can see here that the dark color went into light color, so they cut through the center there. And then the dark heads, they basically hug the wall there. Normally you would be going clockwise, which is left hand against the wall. Now, after color swaps are out, there will be a prayer phase, so basically they teleport out, and they basically land on opposite sides of the room here. Now, you want to be on the side of the room that has the opposite color head. So, in this case, since we're light colors, we want to have Vashai on our side. If we don't, then we'll have to rotate sides, and basically what you do is just going to rotate around 180 degrees, so that way you are on the side with the correct color heads. That center line, the candle line, is the center line, so you just need to cross that over. You can see here we have the opposite color head, so we're able to basically stay where we are and continue to DPS. Now in this phase, if you do have ads that are still up, they'll be stunned. You will lose your color head, so you can see here we don't have colored heads anymore, and so that means we can just continue going on and DPSing. Now during this phase, if for some reason during color swaps only one healer has had their heads color swapped, so basically what that means is you have 2 healers on one side. One of the healers that had to swap, will call out a DPS on the opposite side to switch with them during this phase. So let's say I am a healer, I have the light head, I get color swap, so now I am a dark head, but the other healer still has their dark head. So we have two healers on the light boss. Since I swapped, I will continue to heal my group, my original group, so I'd still be healing people on the Vashai side just from the center of the arena, instead of on their side, obviously. And once prayer phase happens, I will call out one DPS on Vashai's side, and basically during this phase when we don't have any colors, we will swap bosses. We will basically cross through the center line. So in this particular instance, I believe the healers did not swap, so that means they don't have to worry about calling out a DPS. But some other times you will have to swap over. So if you hear your name being called, that basically means during this phase right here, you're going to have to cross over to the opposite boss, so that way the healer can cross over to their side, so that way we have a healer on each side. And of course, once prayer phases happens, get your color head assigned. So again, they'll always apply to the 6 closest people, so you just want to make sure you're somewhat close to Skinrai and Vashai. And so we have more ads that are coming out, and then you just basically repeat this process over again. Now when one of the bosses dies, there will be about 20 seconds, at which point basically when one of the bosses dies, there's going to be a 20-second timer. Everybody loses their head, and you have to kill the other boss within that 20 seconds. Otherwise, it's going to be a group wipe. So it's very important that you manage to keep DPS on both bosses fairly even, so that way they die at around the same time. If they don't die around the same time, there is a chance that you will not be able to kill the other boss fast enough, and you will end up wiping. So that's just something that you want to keep in mind here. So go ahead and continue on with this fight. The color swaps are out, and so you can see that the dark colors heads turned to light, and they just basically ran around, and light colors to dark colors just kind of went behind. As you can see here, both healers happen to swap, so we don't need to necessarily worry about healers calling out for swaps or anything like that. We have the opposite color heads, so we're able to stay here and continue to DPS the bosses during prayer phase. Tanks are basically going to taunt the correct boss and back up, so that way they get the correct colored heads. And then you repeat this phase all over again. So now this is the third ad spawn, so we will have 3 ads that will spawn. There they are. And so you will have to chain all of them in. Now you will see that we have 2 light ads on this side. That is a little bit dangerous, and it's one of the things that might happen when you have ads out. So sometimes the ad placements are fairly random, so sometimes you will have ads that cover each other up. So in this case, we had 2 white ads on the dark boss side, and it can be a little bit difficult to chain them all in. Now in this particular instance, we managed to kill Skinrai. When you kill one of the bosses, it will spawn additional ads as well, so just got to be mindful of that. And then everybody's head colors has disappeared, as you can tell here. So that means everybody can basically stack up right next to Vashai. Whichever tank happens to have taunt on that last boss will just continue to have taunt on that boss. And then the other tank whose boss happened to die is responsible for kind of controlling the ads. So the dark ads, you just want to make sure they're facing away from the group, and they'll be responsible for interrupting any of the light ads as well. So generally speaking, what I do is I just basically try to taunt all the white ads, that way they're always next to me, so that way I can always get the interrupt off. And that is basically that entire fight. So the big thing that a lot of groups mess up on is going to be color swaps. That's usually something that is quite the steep learning curve, because it doesn't happen on normal Maw of Lorkhaj. So again, with color swaps, you will have to swap sides. 3 people, not including the tank, will have their head colors reassigned. If you're going from the light boss to the dark boss, you will cut through the center. If you're going from the dark boss to the light boss, you basically run clockwise, hugging the wall. And at that point, you can continue DPS in the boss. If one healer swaps, but the other healer does not, the healer that swaps will need to swap with a DPS during prayer phase. There are several strategies that you can use to try to combat this. One of them is to basically always go back to your original boss, so except for the tanks. So basically what it is let's say you start off on the dark boss, you will always, after prayer phase, you will always be on the side with dark boss, and the same thing with the light boss. That's one way to try to combat that, instead of having one healer call a DPS to swap, but most groups will just have the healer and DPS swap. That's generally considered to be the most popular strategy as well as the best strategy for this fight here. So that's it for this guide. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there will be a diagram looking at positioning as well as kind of how you want to swap, so you guys have an additional visual aid. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.